As leaders, we've all been in situations where we've been in back-to-back meetings, we've had stressful days, we've been in the middle of conflicts, and we've had no clue what to do. On today's episode of I Can Talk to You All Day, we talk about self-coaching techniques, why it's important, some elements of them, and we also provide some of our own thoughts about how we coach ourselves in situations.
I Could Talk to You All Day is a podcast about what it means to be a leader while also being human. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz.
And I'm John Spears, and we coach executives and leaders just like you about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted.
We're so glad you're here.
Let's get the conversation started. Yo, Lauren.
I woke up this morning thinking that I should start saying your name with some sort of accent.
Do it.
And French is what came to me. And so I will say, hello, Jean.
For now on, please call me Jean when we connect and we talk. Lauren.
I particularly like the pause and then the much softer Jean. I have just hit the point in my Spanish learning journey where I'm starting to get pieces of conversation and I'm not having to translate every single word. And it feels like big progress thanks to the Duolingo owl.
Oh my God, so we're not sponsored by or anything but Duolingo, but I was going to also talk about Duolingo. Or in my brain, I was like, just don't say Dua Lipa.
Right.
That's like the same thing for me.
Yes.
Are you doing Espanol?
See?
See, today was one of those days where I woke up and I looked at my calendar and I was like, oh crap. I have back-to-back meetings all day long from like 9 a.m. to like 4 p.m. I like had to be late to talking to you today because I had to like grab some water and a beef jerky and a fruit bar. And it really reminded me, and I actually think this is a part of today's conversation. It really reminded me of those days when I was working as a COO, as a president of an organization where like my full day was so packed back to back all day long, decision making after kind of challenge and to software and fire drill, that I kind of remembered what it was like to be in a fast-paced corporate environment where I constantly have to coach myself if I'm triggered by something. And very much unlike my days now, where I'm an entrepreneur and I've created lots of space in my calendar to be able to play and to rest and to like work hard, but it's not like I very rarely have days like these. And so I'm curious to hear from you, kind of like when you were in that environment, even before coaching, before you got your coaching certification, if you had a day like that and you found yourself kind of swirling in something, or there was a conflict, or you needed to call one of your coaches or call some support and didn't have time to, or the ability to, or didn't even have a coach. Tell me about what that experience was like for you. Is it that hard of a recall? Is like hurts your chest to think about?
It's honestly, so when I was in my corporate life, we know I was a workaholic. And I was the extra brought into all the meetings because if the meetings got out of hand, I brought it back around. I got us on agendas. I got us on time. And because my hand went up so much to volunteer for stuff, I was always interim managing something and in a meeting that like I didn't belong in, but somebody thought I belonged in. And so I would have meetings from like easily 9 to 5:30. I remember one time I forgot that I had a meeting and I was so hungry and my one meeting ended and I ran out to get food because I didn't have goldfish crackers at my desk, which is what I usually ate for lunch. And I ran across the street and I get a text, "Are you coming?" And it was like 10 after the hour. And it was an executive team meeting that we had every week at that time. I don't know where my brain was. And I replied, I actually forgot I'll be right there. I came in with my takeout food. Um, and that's how it was. And then at 5:30, I would start doing the work I needed to do that came out
Yeah.
of the meetings. So when you say that, like my body responds with this like tightness in my chest and like chaos, dizzying chaos in my brain. And I was always in two places at once. And I know they say you can't multitask, but I think when you go into panic mode and
Yeah.
the adrenaline kicks in and cortisol is high, you can work while there's a meeting going on around you and listen well enough to participate as you need to. And that's what I did all day, every day. And the chaos of that just, I feel it so hard when we talk about it.
Hmm. I remember before I found a coach myself, I was already a COO. I was already kind of at a senior level of an organization. And I remember kind of wanting and needing support, but not having it. Not even knowing what I would call that. Just knowing like I need some support. I need someone else to kind of give me. I need some tools and exercises to help with some things. And I remember when there would be like an interpersonal conflict, or when I would feel triggered in a meeting and not one either know how to regulate that stuff myself or sort of get to the bottom of it myself, much less have additional support. It was such an awful, helpless feeling to feel sort of like imprisoned by an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think today, the thing we want to talk about is coaching yourself as a leader. We are, and before I go any further into talking about this topic, we are firm believers in hiring coaches and hiring support and having whatever kind of support you need. We both have like multiple coaches in different areas of our life. So we are like full throttle believers in having a coach and being a part of some sort of support system. We often talk about results, the formula for results being awareness plus action plus support equals results. And so before we even like lay the foundation for anything else in this conversation, really want to kind of acknowledge that we really think coaching is super important. However, there are times, for instance, like today, for me, when I am back to back, I don't have time to, take a beat, maybe step away, or to call my coach to get some on-demand support. There may be times where you're in a board meeting, you're in a presentation, you're in a sales pitch, you're having a difficult conversation that you need to be able to be that coach for yourself. And so we're hoping to sort of, in this conversation, really dig into that and talk about some tools and exercises and approaches that we use ourselves and that we've used in the past to coach ourselves when that kind of support is not available.
Before I had a coach, any of my self-regulation tools were some form of looking at myself in a mirror, actually, or in my head, and yelling at myself to get it done.
Mm,
And I would read books and pass that wisdom on to my clients. And then in my own space, without my own coach, my challenge was how do I translate that to me instead of saying, like, God, just get up and finish all of this stuff. You're so lazy, right? And learning to self regulate for me has been in part learning kindness through therapy
hmm
and in part learning productivity and recognizing how my body feels and my mind feels through working with a coach. And that has helped me when I don't have a coach or don't have access to a coach to self coach.
hmm
And I think it's such an important tool that we aren't taught. We are taught to do and get things done and finish it and move on to the next thing and be a team player and pitch in. And there's no part of us that is taught take a deep breath. What do you want?
Yeah.
Right? All of the kind of coachy stuff that I know we're going to get into So I think this episode is amazing for people who either don't have access to a coach or don't really know what coaching is like, to get some real solid tools to be able to take that pause and self-coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's my hypothesis as to why leaders and managers and like just humans should be able to coach themselves in any situation. And that is one, because we are humans. We have human experiences. We have
Shocking.
histories. We might not like that. We might not like that the human experience is really messy. I mean, the older I get, the more messy life is. And for someone who likes things super, it's interesting. I don't mind things messy in my physical world. I do not like things messy in my internal world. I like neat and packaged, and like I want my life to look like this bookshelf here in the back, which is like perfectly manicured, like everything has a little spot. And the reality is life isn't like that. We as humans aren't like that. And so we get triggered. We mess up sometimes. We're not perfect. Perfect is like this illusion. And we need the tools to be able to, in the moment, to the best we can, recalibrate, calm our nervous systems down, look at something a different way. You said this, I think, a little bit earlier, is like so many people's first response to something is negative. It's harsh, it's mean. And that self-talk matters to us. And so there's a real impact. And so my hypothesis, one, we need it because we're humans and it's messy. And we also need it because I think maybe I'm just regurgitating your your hypothesis, is that we're never taught this stuff. We're taught
Mhm.
how to give feedback, how to see a ledger, how to write a strategic plan, how to write an email, but we're never taught the skills to effectively and emotionally navigate through the world, particularly in really high pressure, tense situations that a lot of us find ourselves at work, at home, in any sort of leadership role that we're in.
Yeah.
That's sort of my hypothesis with why it's so important that leaders and managers learn the tools of coaching for themselves. What do you think, apart from not knowing how to do it, what do you think some of the challenges are with self-coaching in general, not just for leaders, but like in the whole scheme of things?
At no point in my life was I guided to check in with myself.
Mm.
I was taught, and I think a lot of us were taught, to listen to elders, and whether that's teachers or parents, bosses, older people than us at work or in life. We were taught to listen and learn and serve and do. And I think back to one of my first experiences meditating, which was, instead of being calming for me, like agitated me, because I never sat with myself. I was busy. I busied myself. I served others. That is what I felt like my purpose on earth was. And I still feel like it is my purpose on earth to serve others, to teach them about why they don't have to settle for where they are. And, you and I are very much of the same mind that like life can be exciting and dynamic and work can be fulfilling and impactful and it doesn't have to break you. And nobody taught us that because nobody knows, right? We pass down the things that we know. And my parents just like went to work every day and they didn't
Hmm.
always like it. And a lot of times they didn't like it for a long time, but that was what they chose. And so that was what they did. And that was, their people were who they served. And there was no point in my childhood where anybody's parents took time for themselves.
Hmm.
So the first time I meditated, the first several times I meditated, I did it with like one eye open. Like, how long have I been meditating? Has it been a few minutes yet? Am I breathing right? Right? Like I was very conscious of what was around me. instead of being able to look inward. And so learning self-coaching tools, self-regulation tools, like physical body management and spiritual body management
Mhm.
has been really eye-opening for me. But it's because I've sought out the work. And I think because we're not taught that it's okay and we're not taught to seek out what we need and want for ourselves, we don't even ask why until something is really bad. I
Mhm.
didn't even ask why until both of my shoulders broke. And then it still took a long time to start really doing the work. And at the same time, I was teaching other people. So it was like anything I learned, I served out to other people. It's almost as though it didn't exist for myself
Yeah.
until I realized that some of this stuff that I was learning and that I was preaching and that I was helping other people with could even possibly apply to me.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges with self-coaching, and really any situation is oftentimes we're so in it. We're like in the middle of a forest and we're deep in the forest and we can't see the forest from the trees. And you're surrounded on all sides by the experience, by the emotion, by all the stories you're telling yourself. And so we don't see clearly in that space. And what a coach does or support does is helps you get some elevation high
Mhm.
above it so you can see things the way they really are, or to go into sort of a clearing. I love this tool and we'll talk about it in something that I use on a regular basis, a clearing exercise. And I love the imagery of the clearing exercise because in my mind, when I'm in some mess, some stuff that I need support around, I'm in the forest. And when I'm finally able to get elevation, it's like I'm walking outside of the forest. I'm like taking a step from all the trees and all the like moss and vines into this big clearing, this beautiful prairie or this big open space where there's like some spaciousness to be able to see things differently. And I think that's what coaching is. I think that's what that awareness is what coaching allows for. And it's really hard to do that ourselves. Super challenging to do that when we're in it. I mean, we've had this experience oftentimes. We've gone back and forth of like we're just in it. We're like in the muck, and
Mhm.
until we talk to each other or to something else, it's a very real natural challenge that people have.
Yeah. I think you just described clearing in such a beautiful way. Like the nature part did not occur to me, and the visual of that, because we've been using clearing exercises forever,
Yeah,
but the visual of being stuck in a forest and not knowing your way out, and therefore being in real survival mode,
yeah,
right?
totally.
Because if you don't knock your way out of the forest, then you're just going to continue to be lost in that. And you can't always find the clearing. Sometimes you have to create a clearing. Sometimes you
Totally.
have to, you know that if you look west and there's a clearing, but you're trying to go north, it makes more sense to go to the clearing for a little while. So
Hmm.
my brain's a little bit blown by your metaphor, and it really has hit me. I really appreciate that visual.
Nice. So we talked about this. I'll maybe share this tool that I use in the moment to coach myself, but I'd love to hear some of the tools that you think or some of the approaches around you're in a situation, you're in the muck of it all. How do you get out of it when you need to get out of it? And like I said, one of the things that I use is this idea of a clearing exercise. And I'm not gonna go through it all right now, but it's really just this ability to be able to distinguish facts from stories that we tell ourselves, like what's actually happening in our life, or what is all the indisputable stuff that's happening, have that really clear, and then being able to from that say the kind of story we're telling ourselves. Because oftentimes when I'm in a situation, facts and stories get really mucky. They kind of like can merge into each other. And until I take a second and say, hey, wait a minute, this person sent me an email and it felt terse to me, right? Or it felt like an attack. Until I'm able to say, what did this person actually say? And how did it make me feel? What's the story I'm telling about it? You really can't address the sort of underlying challenge that exists. So it's really about when I'm in this sort of coaching, self-coaching space, I try to get super clear on these facts and stories, and then kind of be able to see something in a different situation, a different scenario, a different point of view.
When I think about self-coaching and the real shift for me and for a lot of my clients in that is we always go to why,
Yeah.
right? Why am I like this? Why am I not doing this? Why can't I get this done? What's wrong with me? Right? Which is a variation of why, right? Like, why am I wrong? And when we ask ourselves why, we dip ourselves into like a therapeutic space and how my life has affected me kind of
Hmm.
space. And when we're trying to self-coach, we're trying to get ourselves to an elevated level. And why becomes ineffective. It becomes like head spinny. And so I like to shift my whys to what's. And I like, what do I want and what do I need?
Hmm.
And I love that list. If you can like sit down with yourself set a timer for 4 minutes so that you're not sitting for an hour and a half thinking about what do I want, what do I need, and sort of agonizing over it. But you get out that surface level, like what is spinning inside of me? What do I want? What do I need? And so that for me is a good first step. And it's really like in the moment, what do I want? What do I need? If I'm in
Hmm.
back to back to back meetings and I haven't gotten water, you today made a coaching choice for yourself. And you said, I'm going to be 5 minutes late to record. I need to grab a drink. That also prompted me to say, you know what? I need a drink too. Water and coffee, y'all. This isn't drunk podcasting. Um, but
But that would be
it's
fun though. Like
that
a drunk
would,
us to like get on here and drunk podcast
yeah,
about something.
yeah. I don't drink, so that would be a little bit challenging, but
I don't really
you know,
drink either, but
yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, so wants and needs list can sometimes help you step out. The other thing that I really like to do in the moment is to figure out my first step. So very often when we get into overwhelm, when we need self-coaching the most, we're so bogged down and so buried in all of the things we have to do that we do that little dance where we start to walk towards something physically or metaphorically, and then we spin around because we remember something else, and then we spin around because we remember something else. And then all of a sudden, our office closet is clean and we forgot where we started,
Yeah.
right? And so it's figuring out I can only do one thing at a time. I like to think that I can do several things at a time. And sometimes, like I said earlier, I can half listen and half work on my computer. But with all of the things coming down on us all the time, we get to decide what is one thing I can do in this
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And if we think of that one thing and it's huge, then we break it down into steps. What's the first step? What's the step before that? Right? What is preventing me from doing what I think is the first step? And really just giving ourselves the moment to be with ourselves and make a conscious choice.
Yeah. The other thing that I really love doing when I'm in these moments is particularly if I'm triggered by something, if I'm having this like physical reaction to like a comment that something made or there's like a conflict, is to go internally and to really inquire about what's happening. What are my thoughts, my beliefs, my emotions, my body sensations? And asking that question without any judgment. And, I've done this in a meeting where like there was a conflict going on and I just needed to quickly be like, what is actually happening internally? Like, not the why, doesn't matter the why, but it matters what's happening inside. And when I'm able to do that and give space for that, I feel like oftentimes our emotions or our body sensations just want to be seen. They want to be acknowledged. Like they're there for a reason. And I found that the more often that I don't acknowledge them, the stronger they show up. But if I'm able to, if I'm feeling a little triggered, if my chest gets a little tight, if my throat gets a little tight, if I feel tension in my shoulders, if I'm feeling like my face is getting red from anger, or frustration, to just take a second and jot that stuff down, it's so helpful just to figure out what's happening inside. And that's totally taken a lot of the pressure off. It's kind of like letting some air out of the tire,
Yeah.
to be able to not be an 8 anymore and get down to maybe a 6 or a 4 or a 3. And that's so important, especially when you want to show up proactively and intentionally and not be reactive in whatever sort of thing that's happening in the moment.
The proactive reactive piece is so important because on a day like today, when you have back-to-back meetings, there is a lot of reactivity. You have a meeting, the meeting's starting, you got a notification from your calendar that the meeting's starting, you're going to the meeting, you're participating in the meeting, knowing that you have a hard stop at the top of the hour because you have another meeting. And a question that I love in those moments is, what are my choices?
Yeah,
I think we forget we have choices.
all the time.
You had a choice to say, well, I'm going to be on time and I'm just going to freaking be thirsty. Or to say, I'm going to be 5 minutes late to a friend and colleague who's an understanding person. And people are 5 minutes late all the time to things or have to leave 5 minutes early. You're not the first person in the universe to make a declaration that you're not going to be to a meeting on time. But we forget that in the moment and in the swirl. So stopping and saying, what are my choices right now?
Yeah. Speaking of hard stops, I have one. And if I didn't, I could talk to you all freaking day
All
about
day.
this. There's so much more I want to talk about this topic because it's so important. And I think so many leaders actually need some more support around how to do this stuff in the moment. But
Mm-hmm.
if it wasn't for this meeting I have to run to, thank you all so much for listening and for being a part of our community. We love these conversations and we love your engagement in these as well. And we can't wait for the next one.
We're so grateful you decided to be with us during this episode. Subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and join us next time for more Real Talk.